Hello everybody and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Video Clips. A couple things I'll mention. We have a lot of people who are feeling pretty sideways about this whole COVID thing. And so we have started 3 groups that I think are going to have been really helpful. We did this a long time ago, but a lot of people don't know about it. We have a depression and anxiety group for people 15 to 20 years of age, different age group. We have one for older adults, and we have a COVID-19 stress and anxiety, depression and anxiety group for people who are specifically dealing with the fallout of losing friends and jobs and all of the horrific things that are going on, parents in nursing homes that you can't see, and etc. We've made this as inexpensive. I mean, it's the cheapest therapy you're ever going to get. It's done in a group via teleconference. You can live any place in the world and participate. Kylie Aurora is the therapist. She's amazing, and I just hear all the time from our members and clients how much they appreciate that as a support group. And then remember, we train people to do what we do, professional training for careers in the healthcare field. So if you're interested in talking to us about that, you can start anytime. My email address is pampopper@msn.com. And one other thing I'll mention is we have a new Cancer Concierge program that includes hours and hours of education about cancer, its causes, and treatments and screening tests and all that kind of stuff. One-on-one discussions with our informed healthcare staff here, meetings with our dietitians, and monthly conference calls that help cancer patients connect with one another. So if you're interested in any of that, pampopper@msn.com. All right, I have a lot of stuff to cover with you today, just about what's going on. I'm going to start with some optimistic stuff, and then I'm going to tell you what's going on so you can see the disconnect between data and what the responses are, which is a little bit of what I was talking about yesterday. The responses to what's happening are not necessarily consistent with what common sense says we should do. So at a press conference, Dr. Scott Atlas, who is the physician that appears to have replaced Fauci at the White House, he did this press conference with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. And DeSantis said at this conference that he would never do any of these lockdowns again. And he said that he's been advocating for a full spectrum approach in dealing with the crisis. Atlas supported Governor DeSantis' comments on lockdowns throughout this press conference, emphasizing the importance of continuing to protect people with the highest risk. And he has basically said that it is not necessary to wait for a vaccine to open up society. What we really need is herd immunity. And before everybody goes sideways on this and says that's ridiculous, you really need to look into the background on viruses and how the world has experienced viruses in the past. I mean, we had tens of millions of cases of swine flu worldwide, and we didn't lock anything down, and we're pretty much immune to it now due to herd immunity, at least for a few years. So, let's contrast the consequences, which everybody who's watching this probably is aware. There's some pretty devastating consequences of these lockdowns. Let's contrast that with the data in your area, which often is not very frightening. How many people are in the hospital? How many people have died of COVID in the month of, say, August in your area? So in the month of June, people age 18 to 24, 25% had considered thoughts of serious thoughts of suicide. At one point during the crisis, 2/3 of scheduled cancer screenings were not completed. Younger people, especially those attending primary, secondary school, or college, statistically have a much lower risk of developing symptoms and becoming infected with COVID-19. And Dr. Atlas made a very important point as he was reviewing all this data. He said the point of all these things is to save lives, not document asymptomatic people who are at low risk. And that's what all this incessant testing is doing. What you're doing by knocking on doors, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, is you keep coming up with asymptomatic people who test positive, which is not as definitive as you might imagine. And then we get everybody all ginned up and excited about it when we really should be focused on vulnerable people and saving their lives. And drumming up a bunch of cases in Franklin County from knocking on doors and testing everybody who enters a healthcare facility, that doesn't save the life of anybody, all right? According to some new data that came out of UCLA and Stanford, and I'll tell you the two people involved in publishing it, Jeffrey Klausner is a professor of medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the David Geffen School of Medicine, an adjunct professor of epidemiology in the Fielding School of Public Health, and then Rajiv Bhatia is a clinical assistant professor, primary care and population health at Stanford University. And the reason why I get into the credentials is that there are well-credentialed people at prestigious institutions who have a different idea about this. And I said yesterday, we have got to start having a discussion instead of a tyrannical set of rules and regulations with absolutely no debate in the public, in the eyes of the public. This should be on the news every day. So here goes. Among U.S. counties with populations greater than 500,000 people, during the week ending June 13th, 2020, when things were still pretty locked down, and they're still pretty locked down now, and this is September, the median estimate of the county level probability of a confirmed infection is 1 infection in 40,500 person contacts. For a 50 to 64-year-old individual, that's me, the median estimate of the county level probability of a hospitalization is 1 in 709,000 person contacts. Now, does this sound incredibly dangerous? Does this sound like we can't go to the movies, have a sporting event, cancel the Big Ten, no arts organizations doing anything until next year? Median estimate of the county level probability of a fatality, 1 in 6,670,000 person contacts. Conclusions and relevance. Estimates of the individual probabilities of COVID-19 infection, hospitalization, and death vary widely, but may not align with public risk perceptions. We're scaring the hell out of people out there, you guys. And these are real data from real scientists, from really good institutions, and why don't you get to listen to that? Why doesn't the rest of the public get to listen to that? All right. Some data adjustments while we're on the subject of data here. According to the Centers for Disease Control, of the 7,175 people who died of COVID-19 in Illinois, 396 died of only COVID, and the rest had comorbidities. Montgomery County, Tennessee, Thursday, September 3rd, active COVID cases dropped from 1,038 to 195 after correcting for errors. And I mentioned this yesterday. The problem is the 1,038 probably scared the heck out of everybody and got a lot of attention. The fact that it was 80% off, 80-some% off, probably didn't get any attention at all. If somebody like me wasn't telling you about it, you wouldn't know about it. The people who live there probably don't know about it. And then this is just too good. A family of a woman who died in February 2020, 7 months ago, reported receiving a letter claiming that she tested positive for COVID-19. She died before there had been any COVID detected in Tennessee. And her son said, I'm just having a hard time understanding how they can say someone is COVID-19 when they are not even alive. Well, that goes to flaws in the system. Now, let me tell you what's going on in Ohio right now. At the same time that we were beginning to file our lawsuit and start that fight, our Emperor DeWine had some new ideas in mind. The thing you need to understand, and I keep emphasizing, is spikes in people who test positive lead to, first of all, self-righteous lectures from politicians and people who follow them and believe them, followed by restrictions and lockdowns and more testing, and now in Ohio, isolation camps. Our governor says, don't worry, isolation will be left up to the consumer to decide. He gave this offhanded comment about thinking that it's ridiculous to even criticize this, like some healthcare worker who doesn't want to go home and infect his family. But I want to point out something else that our emperor said early in the situation in Ohio, and you can watch this online. This is direct transcript of what he said. He was asked about the state of emergency. He said, I would not read too much into the state of emergency. It enables us to do a few things in government that we couldn't have done. It makes it easier for us to procure medical supplies, for example, and not have to go through the normal state bidding process. I wouldn't read too much into that. Listening to what Dr. Acton said is more important than hyping the state of emergency. It's a legal necessity that we're going to have to go through if we're going to get these products quickly. Well, we all know what happened next. It's 6 months later. Football's off. Cultural events are off. The ballet company here canceled its whole fall season. No Nutcracker, which is the staple that supports dance companies. The unemployment rate has skyrocketed, kids are out of school, everybody's wearing masks. So now we're supposed to take his ideas about the isolation camps and not make too much of that. I mean, you know, why are we even worrying? Well, I have the health orders here, and he calls it non-congregate sheltering. This is from the Ohio Department of Health, just so you know, it came out. And it basically says, for those who are unable to safely self-quarantine in their places of residence, and to isolate those diagnosed with or showing symptoms of COVID-19. Examples of the type of persons who belong in the isolation camps are those who test positive for COVID-19 who do not require hospitalization but need isolation, including those exiting from hospitals, those who've been exposed to COVID-19 who do not require hospitalization, and asymptomatic high-risk individuals needing social distancing as a precautionary measure. Sheltering specific populations in non-congregate shelters should be determined by a local public health official's direction or guidance and should be based on individual needs. So this doesn't sound like something not to worry about, does it? And it sounds like you could just be an asymptomatic person tested when they're knocking on doors, and if a public health official thinks you need to go away, well, that's the way it's going to be. So what this basically, the Ohio Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, EMA, is to secure the necessary approvals for the use of non-congregate sheltering. Statewide and local government agencies should take all necessary actions to identify both public and private facilities, secure available space, and enter into contracts or mutual aid agreements that might be necessary to procure, equip, and operate these shelters. Public colleges and universities are directed to make available vacant grounds, buildings, and facilities of such college or university as determined to be necessary and suitable after reasonable consultation between the respective college or university officials and the local Board of Health, Ohio EMA, or County Emergency Management Agency. So what they're doing is they're expanding capacity. They're asking all the universities that are doing online learning and all that sort of thing to use their facilities. Now, does this sound, why would you be organizing massive numbers of spaces for isolation if you had no intention of putting anybody there? It just doesn't sound like something not to be worried about, in my opinion. And this was August 31st, and it's going on for 90 days. So for September, October, November, everybody in Ohio who tests positive from knocking on doors, and if you go get your knee replaced and all that kind of stuff, you're subject, or your family members may be subject, all right? So here's his response to this. This is the order, all right? So I guess he counts on the fact that nobody goes online and actually reads this stuff. He says, I want to talk about a rumor. I don't spend much time talking about rumors that are on the internet because we wouldn't get much done if we did that all the time. But this one, I've gotten so many calls over the weekend that I thought we'd just have to deal with it today. It's in the category of crazy, ridiculous internet rumors. This, I want to put it up here. This is the Ohio Department of Health. So you're basically saying that reading from the Ohio Department of Health is a crazy internet rumor. The non-congregate sheltering order creates a funding mechanism for anybody needing a safe place to stay. Funding mechanism. The state gets reimbursed for every person they put in one of these places. So they're getting a financial incentive, just like testing everybody who goes into the hospital. As soon as they can declare them hospitalized COVID patient, there's an incentive. The non-congregate sheltering order creates a funding mechanism for anyone needing a safe place to stay. The governor gave an example of a hospital worker dealing with COVID-19 patients who doesn't want to risk infecting a high-risk family member living at home. I want to make this very clear. This order does not create FEMA camps to force anyone to quarantine against their will. It says right here in the order, sheltering specific populations in non-congregate shelters should be determined by local public health officials' direction or guidance and should be based on individual needs. That doesn't sound like not against anybody's will. Okay? I mean, I'm not the brightest lamp in the chandelier, but I know how to read, Mr. DeWine, the Emperor. All right. Let's see. I'm aware there are rumors on the internet that incorrectly claims these orders allowed to be children to be separated from their parents without permission. Let me just say this is absolutely ridiculous. It is not true. And he says the reimbursement has only been used a handful of times in Ohio. Well, I think that the reason why he's expanding this to all over Ohio and lots of universities and et cetera is because he's planning to use it more often. That's what I think. And along that line, Governor DeWine announced Thursday his order requiring all K-12 schools to report COVID-19 cases to their local health departments. Schools must do this within 24 hours of notification of a positive test from a student, teacher, staff member, or coach. The Ohio Department of Health Interim Director Lance Himes, who is an attorney, not a physician. We have no health officials involved in any of this except for the Wexner Medical Center, who is executing the orders from the emperor. So anyway, the bottom line is schools are mandated to report cases. Those infected are encouraged to notify their school. It is unclear by the order's language whether the school's reporting official will divulge the infected individuals' identities and personal information. The order reads, within 24 hours of becoming aware of a student, teacher, staff member, or coach who tests positive or is diagnosed with COVID-19, each school shall report the case to their local health department. So why would you be doing that? Why do you need to know which school has a case? Why? Well, could be because of the non-congregate sheltering order and the fact that the state gets reimbursed every time they stick somebody in there. I don't think this is a crazy conspiracy theory. I read it to you from the health department's order. It's posted online. You can go look at it today, all right? And I encourage people to do it because I get accused of a lot of things, including blowing things out of proportion and that sort of thing. Well, you go look at it and you tell me if you think I blew it out of proportion. Well, we're getting our day in court. That's fun. So we'll get a chance to air all of this in court. We'll see if a jury thinks, because eventually this will be tried in front of a jury, and we'll see what the emperor has to say when we depose him and his people and all that sort of thing. We'll see what he has to say about all of this. Why are you asking schools to report kids and parents and coaches, or kids and teachers and coaches who are positive? And what is it? What do you think's coming that you're going to need every public college and university to set aside space for isolation facilities? And why do you tell the public it's up to the consumer when your order says public officials will make the determination? Lots of inconsistencies there. Call me crazy, but I think we ought to pay attention to them. All right, that's all for today. My email address is pampopper@msn.com. Feel free to pass this on to anybody who you think would like to know the truth about all this stuff, and I'll be back to you tomorrow with more news.